Welcome to Live at the Nut Bar. You're here with JB, Nathan from our Christchurch team, and Sarah from TRA, who's been doing a bunch of research for us about buying off plan. So Sarah, why is buying a home so emotional for people?
I mean, do I really have to say it? I feel like anyone who's been in that position would agree that it is one of the most emotional buying decisions we ever make, right? Because our home represents who we are as people. Like when we invite guests over, it is a massive reflection, not just of our status in society, but also our lifestyle and what hobbies we have, what our family structure is, and so on. Of course, it's emotional.
And what sort of stood out most with buyers in terms of how they perceive buying a property off plan?
The number one thing that really stood out to us is this drop off in the conversion funnel. We see 8 out of 10 people who are likely to buy a house in the next 3 years open to buying off plan, but then only 3 out of 10 considering it strongly. So we're losing people somewhere on that journey. They just don't seem to be falling in love with what they actually find once they start exploring.
What do you think the benefits are? What were people thinking the benefits are of buying off plan versus, for example, buying an existing house?
So there's a really straightforward quantitative answer to that, and that is that the main benefits of buying off plan are around that feeling of control and customizability, because most people wouldn't actually trust themselves to design an entire house, right? We're not architects, we're not experts, and we maybe don't even trust our own taste that much, but everybody wants to weigh in on some details on what that home actually looks like. And it's really exciting for people to have that opportunity within a curated sense of selection, basically. And I think that's really what sets off-plan apart from just buying an existing new build.
Yeah. And Nathan, how does a buyer sort of get some comfort around the developer, just that confidence that they're going to get a nice product, it's going to even get built, right? How do they go about doing that?
Look, Christchurch, historically, the market never experienced any townhouses, right? So we always had your typical 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, single double garages, 4-bedroom. But after COVID, we've seen a surge of townhouses, and look, the townhouses are still quite affordable, or the units are still quite affordable. But to answer your question, how people get comfort around developers, I guess, again, with limited sort of people involved in development space, we don't really have too many developers doing all sorts of townhouses. So you've still got the likes of bigger groups, the likes of Volbrook, likes of Williams Corporation. You've got Mike Greer, who's been doing townhouses for years now. So having one of those names, it gives a bit of a comfort to people that, hey, look, these are big groups. They've been doing townhouses for last so many years. You've got Brooksfield, who's just really dominating that beautiful colonial style space, and they've been really successful because they've found their niche. So I guess a lot of people, they go with those established developers with more track record. But yeah,
Brooksfield must actually be a really good example, because it actually came up in our qualitative groups, which, it wasn't a huge sample size, especially not from Christchurch, but the fact that they've clearly differentiated themselves to have a known brand in that space says a lot, because I don't think that a lot of developers actually have invested in their branding as much.
Yeah, I was talking to one of the builders who actually build those townhouses, and it's a bit expensive to build what the product they're building. But there are great Orange Homes, that's 40 years old company in Christchurch. They're doing some townhouses. You've got lots of small one-man band builders. Christchurch, it's flat, so you've got lots of choice of land. You'll always have a lot of established small building companies. They'll always look for some opportunities of townhouses if the demand is there.
And what sort of questions should buyers be asking developers?
They should be asking, do you actually have building consent? Because a lot of developers, they start selling product when they don't even have resource consent. So we've seen a lot in Christchurch. You've got some renders, put it on the market, and you ask them, hey, when the when the project is going to kick off, well, we're just waiting for the resource consent. In my opinion, if one of my clients is buying a property off the plans, I would probably advise them to sign a contract if they have a building consent. Knowing the development space so well for the last few years, it can take good 3 to 6 months for you to get a building consent.
Yep.
And imagine if you're buying with a view that you guys are expecting a baby, or you want to move in, say, early in the new year. That certainty is quite important for people.
It's a huge barrier. We've seen that in the quantitative research, that not expecting timelines to delay with such a massive decision that affects your entire life if it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Because you might be living with people until that point or whatever, that becomes a real barrier. So that timeline reliability is huge. One thing I would recommend to buyers is also to actually go and look at previous developments and maybe even talk to the people who live there.
Yeah.
If I was a developer, I would offer that proactively. If I believe in my product, I would ask people to actually get testimonials from people who live in that space, because it shows that you're really building with a resident in mind, not just an investor mindset.
Yeah, we had a client, he bought a townhouse a couple of years ago that he bought 3 years ago off the plans. Kitchen sink started leaking, and he's now struggling to find who the developer is. And a lot of one-man band will set up just in a small entity just to do that project, and they then get rid of that entity and on to the next one. It becomes really hard to then track down. And that's where having a registered master builder's warranty of 10 years is quite important. If you are unable to find your builder, you can always go to the master builders and say, hey guys, look, I need some help.
And that's that reputational risk that's now creating an uphill battle for off-plan buying, I think, because we saw that come through in the data so clearly, that people have heard these stories. They have a really poor overall, the reputation of that particular market is really poor, in the sense that it's not only kind of pissing people off that they don't have great options to choose from, but they're even angry about what it does to their community at large. Like we saw that in some of the quotes that were coming through, that this ocean of sameness and the cookie cutter developments with hundreds of houses that look exactly the same, that are clearly built with investor mindsets in mind. We all know that people live there because they have to, not because they actually want to, and that really create, like, people were talking about ghettoization and the risk of like actually ruining, like it's a real some people's minds already. Yeah,
look, one of our clients is buying an investment property in Ranui. I actually don't know where Ranui is, but he's buying somewhere in Ranui. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom with a car park for $620, and that will rent for $600 a week. That's a rental appraisal. So we've got a lot of Christchurch people still looking at some affordable opportunities, and I just get really surprised when I see a block of 20, 25, because we are not used to see these large developments in Christchurch. Anything more than 6, 7 townhouses, we just feel, God, it's we've got
a lot more of it in Auckland, obviously, but it depends, right? Because it's that feel when you walk into a project where you go, how does that feel just when you walk in? Is it all concrete jungle with a whole lot of sameness slapped up, or does it feel like you're walking into a nice livable community? Because you can have large developments that are amazing, but you can have some absolute shockers as well.
Christchurch people, they are getting warmed up to these developments, and but there are very limited pockets in Christchurch. And I've been working in this market for the last 12, 13 years now. Even when I was at the bank, and there was never a concept of townhouses. I guess the townhouses exploded just before COVID, and really then accelerated.
I'm obviously not from here. I don't know if you've picked up on the accent, but I'm German, and I come from a country that has had high density housing. Like, townhouses are not even the high, like the standard in city centers, it's apartments. And it is really interesting to me how you can, I've been living here for 13 years now, how you can see sort of the cultural shifts happening really slowly, because we won't be getting around it, right? Like, high density housing is crucial for controlling traffic as a I think the number one thing people say about Auckland is the bad thing of living there. And then also it's actually better for the environment to leave our green spaces as they are and bring people closer together. And it should make for livelier communities. But I feel like that promise has not been held up so far. We see that in the quantitative data that people currently associate townhouse living, yes, with crowdedness, yes, with a lack of privacy, so the bad stuff, and not so much with a more lively community or good design, smart, savvy design, and so on, which it can absolutely be. We've seen that in other large cities like Melbourne, Sydney, and so on, to be a little bit closer to home, that smart is possible. Like and then small becomes savvy rather than shameful. It becomes like a smart choice that you're making to get the most out of a small space for the least amount of money, rather than I just can't afford better, so I have to be.
Yeah, and I was listening to one of your talks maybe a few days ago that how can you do that without increasing the price? And I think that's actually spot on. How can you still make that unit look a nice architectural unit, but still affordable, right? So Christchurch, you've got a typical 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom with a car park. You can pick up today near stadium for like $480 to $520, $530, which is quite affordable.
Well, it's incredibly affordable.
Yeah, it's
relative
very
to
affordable.
Auckland.
And considering if as a first-time buyer, if you're doing a Kaionga or a loan, you only need 5% deposit to buy that home. So you only need $25,000 in your Kiwi sale. So it's quite affordable.
Yeah.
But first-time buyers, they're just spoiled with so much choice in Christchurch. You can pick up a solid brick and tile home in Hornby for $620, 3-bedroom with 600 square meter section, 5 minutes to the airport, 10 minutes to the uni. You've just got so much choice.
That's the difference down here, right? Is that the gap between a standalone house, the Kiwi dream, and a townhouse, they're quite close together, so it's not much of a stretch to get to the house. Whereas in Auckland, the gap between the townhouse and the standalone house is quite far. You know, and so
it is actually.
You know, and in time, you know, standalone houses in Auckland City will just be unattainable. For people in their
my sister lives in Birmingham, and I went there for the first time last year. I was gobsmacked. It's so different to New Zealand. So different. Like I've hardly seen any standalone houses. They all look the same.
And I've been doing it for 150 years.
And nobody minds buying a property if that's old. And good luck trying to sell someone in Christchurch at 1910s, 1920s. They won't even look into it. Well, they may look into it if it's in a nice character villa in Papanui or St Albans or Maryvale, but it's Christchurch people, after the earthquakes, everyone's mindset has changed. They will not look at anything pre-1920s and 1930s.
Yeah, it's funny because I told this anecdote to you already. It's not in the research, but it is true that in my development, I will live in a townhouse in Auckland, 33 houses, and I am very pleased to say that developer did all the right things, ticks all the boxes of our research. Not a single Kiwi in any of those houses. Canadians, Americans, Germans, Sri Lankans, Chinese.
People that are used to high density living.
And who value the closest to a train station over the white picket fence and the cold rooms.
Well, and look, quite possibly, I think there's also something potentially with immigrants where they don't have their parents living down in Hamilton, so don't have to worry about, you know, the cars as much as perhaps.
Maybe. I don't know if that's true, though. I do think that car parks are still a really important factor that, unfortunately, given how public transport, for example, in Auckland works, I know that Christchurch and Wellington are probably better in that regard. They are really, like, that's a hard one to solve. And I think from the research we've seen that 95% of people say they need a covered car park. I would, after going really deep on that, including with the qualitative research, we felt like obviously cars are built to be outside. So nobody needs that covered car park because they want to put their car in there. I literally had someone laugh in my face in the group saying like, that's not, garage isn't for my car. The garage is for my
everything else.
For all my stuff.
Office.
But we also heard the huge pain point that a missing car park creates in your everyday life if you are living in Auckland city centre and you just can't find parking to drop off your shopping and so on. So I think that unfortunately we are at this really uncomfortable place where in Munich, if you don't have a car park, which nobody has, you use the tram that drops you off 50 meters from your front door and it goes every 10 minutes around the clock and so on. Whereas here we just don't have that public transport system developed yet. So it's a tricky one to fix.
Yeah. So if I was a buyer and I'm looking at sort of buying off plan, I'm at least considering it. We talked about, okay, in terms of the developer, you can go and look at their previous work. You can do a whole lot of sort of stuff there. I'm not going to be able to walk into this thing. So, how do I get myself over the line? What are those big questions that I should be asking? What are the things that I should be looking for? Maybe that I haven't surfaced myself, because sometimes you don't surface stuff until you're actually in a space and you go, oh, wow, this is a bit small. Where am I going to store my stuff? What are those big things that people should be thinking about when they're looking at buying off plan?
I'll give you an example of Fletcher's, right? So they're building over 100 units right in the middle of Christchurch CBD, and they've got a examples unit set up. So it's like it's like a show home, and it's like to like. They're building hundreds of those right in the middle of town. So
it's kind of handy, right? Because
you
actually get to go and look at it.
Very, very handy. You can touch the fittings and fixtures, and you know what quality of your tapier is, and But these days, like, technology is becoming quite advanced, and you've got a lot of walkthroughs, 360 walkthroughs, and often, if the bedroom is, let's say, 3 by 3, 3 by 3 by 3, you sort of know how big it's going to be.
Well, one of the things I was going to say with that, you've got to be a bit careful.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking off plan, they'll throw a double bed in the plan.
Yeah.
You've got to be clear on how big is that bed that you've thrown in, because they make it look spacious.
Yeah.
And then you learn it's just a double.
Yeah.
It's not even a queen.
Yeah.
And people have definitely picked up on that, and they don't trust those renders and pictures.
They shouldn't.
So
They shouldn't.
show homes and walkthroughs. That's what I would advise buyers to do. But I also really think that I'm going to sound like a therapist here for a second, but I'm a psychologist after all. The buyer themselves can have a deeper look at their what are the deeper functional and emotional needs that they're actually covering. Because if you're like, I need a garage, I need that storage space from a garage, then the deeper functional need isn't that you actually need a garage. You need a place for dirty equipment out of your way, that is easily accessible from the ground floor, that you can easily transport things out and in and out of. That's actually what the garage fulfills. And that can be fulfilled in other ways. Like, for example, you could have a extended laundry in the back of the house that has that space, or you could have a community space with like lockers or something like that, where you can keep outdoor equipment. And really ask yourself, where are you willing to make those compromises, but your essential needs are still getting met?
And again, that same location. You've got location in Christchurch. If someone's buying off the plans right now, they're just buying for location. One of my clients went unconditional on the townhouses with Migria, and they're just buying it for location, because you've got Riverside Market, a minute walk.
So that's the amenities,
it's
right?
Amenities, yeah. The young couple, she's an accountant, works for KPMG in town, and he, I don't know what he does, but it's just they can walk to work and go to Hagley Park for a walk, and still they're paying $610 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom.
So again, the functional need is not location, but convenience.
Correct.
That's if you see yourself from that light, that you try to get to the bottom of what you actually want, then it becomes a lot easier to analyze the decisions you're making based on their long-term viability, because you actually these days might have to live in that house for quite a while, right? That's the other thing that's happened in the market, and that's sort of been reflected in our qualitative conversations, that people currently don't expect that it's a given anymore that they can get out of that unit in 2 to 3 years, that they might actually have to sit on it for 5 to 10 years to actually make a decent amount of equity back. And that means a prison sentence if you don't want to be in that place, right?
Yeah.
So people are really a lot more picky about how, because they know they might actually have to stay in that place for a little bit longer.
Yeah. It's it's an interesting one. So, in an Auckland context, master planned community, big community, Hobsonville Point. It's actually I love it. I think it's beautiful. It's been really well designed. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Like average doesn't exist. Everyone's got different needs. But the interesting thing for me with Hobsonville Point has been, there are people that will move in there and they don't mind not having a backyard because they've built so many parks into the community that, well, the kids can just go and play at the park and it's a safe community, versus I need to have my own backyard. And I was talking to one woman and she's like, why would I want a backyard? We're never in it. I'd have to mow it.
Yeah.
Now I've got a council backyard that's looked after for me. And it's way better, right? And that's her mindset. And she's like, I love Hobsonville Point. And then, like, I was just thinking about that as you guys were talking. I was thinking about my dog. I need a backyard. It needs to be fenced because I've got a dog. Our dog never goes in the backyard, ever. I need to pee, and it doesn't need a big backyard to pee. His big treat is going for a decent walk where he gets to go and smell all the other dogs around the community, right?
Yeah, we did this trade-off exercise because when we did the qualitative research, we were really keen not to just ask people, what do you want in your dream home? Because then you just get a laundry list of what everybody would love to see, but is probably not the reality, because we all know that, especially when you're buying your first home, nobody ends up with exactly what they wanted, right? We all make trade-offs in the process. And it was so interesting to me that no matter what trade-off we did, there was always one voice really strongly arguing for one side, and the other voice like, I'm a kitchen nerd. I would never compromise on my kitchen. This has to be absolutely exactly what I want it to be. And the other person saying, I don't care about my kitchen at all. I want more space in this room. I need that customizability or whatever. And it just shows not just that people, what you just said, average satisfies no one. If you just build average over and over and over again, nobody's going to find what they actually want. But also that these aren't superficial reasons. They actually have really meaningful reasons in people's identity and the aspirational lifestyles they want, and how they see themselves and so on. And you're not just going to persuade them by not addressing their different needs. So that's why we landed on, I really wish I could have come out of this research and just given developers the recipe for the perfect average house to buy, build off plan and then sell it. But it doesn't exist. And I think that the economies of scale go out the window if you're not able to sell. So it is worth building a differentiated portfolio with different audiences in mind that actually caters to the uniqueness of different people, basically.
Yeah. And look, I think Christchurch will grow from a mindset one day, and I'm practically thinking maybe give another 5 years, Christchurch first-time buyers will grow from the mindset that it's okay to buy a townhouse. Right now, good luck trying to sell a townhouse to a first-time buyer whose mum and dad, they'll say, are you serious? Townhouse? That's not us. Because you've got lots of other choice. But give another 5 years, people will grow from the mindset that, you know what, it's actually okay to buy a townhouse.
Yeah, the interesting thing for me with Christchurch, right, is like when I lived in London, I loved it. Admittedly, I didn't have kids, right? So single. But I really loved the proximity of my home to my whole life. The local pub.
Yeah.
The local pub, which I went to quite a bit.
And there are neighborhoods. Every time a friend comes over,
all the pubs got gutters.
We take them out. And my friend called me from Kingsland once and was like, so you told me this was a cool neighborhood. Where is it? And I was like, where are you? Like, well, I'm on this street. And I was like, oh no, you have to go one street over because the neighborhood is actually just one street.
Yeah.
It's not like we're used to going off into different corners, but no, it's just that one street. And that is because of how spread out our cities here in New Zealand are, right? That you don't have enough population to feed multiple businesses in a whole, like, grapevine of.
The thing I was going to say about Christchurch, as a foreigner, is that the Christchurch city is really cool. Everything's walking distance. It's great coming. I love coming down
Yeah.
here.
I went to the property council talk, and they've done 10 years research after the earthquakes, and they feel Christchurch is going to be one of the coolest city in New Zealand.
Yeah, I
in
think so.
5 to 10 years time. You've
Pretty
got
cool now,
you've
to
got
be
you've
honest.
got stadium, the new convention center. They had a conference just a couple of weeks ago with 60 different countries, and imagine like even 5 people from that delegation will go and say, "Oh, that was actually pretty cool. I can walk to Riverside Market. I can walk to the terrace."
100%. Every time I'm down here, I'm like, oh God, I wish I hadn't built my community up in Auckland, because now I don't want to open another can of worms in this country. But 100%, like I have so many, like, it's really interesting that when I first came to New Zealand, I stayed at like a flat share, and I lived with a bunch of Kiwi couples. They've all gone into literally every corner of the world. None of them live in Auckland anymore. They were studying medicine, engineering, becoming lawyers, and so on. All of these higher earning jobs, peers of mine, seem to be fleeing Auckland because, and I know them still. Some of them have become really good friends, and they say, why would I put up with Auckland, with living worse than my parents have, with better jobs than my parents had? And I feel like that's really telling, because it's kind of like a sad story that we haven't managed to get the infrastructure in Auckland right to keep it an appealing city with that increase in population.
I think it's improving, like, because I've been in Auckland now, I'm going to say probably just over 20 years, and I think it's improved a lot. It's still got a way to go. But it's improved a heap. Hey, so probably 2 things to finish with. So I'll start with you, Sarah, and then come over to you, Nathan, for just a finance question from a mortgage broker perspective. But with you first, Sarah. So let's just quickly go through what were those big sort of emotional needs that I think surfaced through the research that would form the things that home buyers are mentally going through that checklist. So I think we obviously talked about, if there's not a garage, then how are you handling that sort of what we might call wet storage space, or where dirty storage, I don't know what you want to call it, but so that was one of them. Obviously this spare room thing, which is where am I going to do my other stuff?
The room that isn't anything but spare, because people can absolutely see what they are going to be doing in it. So in the research, we actually developed this framework that's built on the classic psychological framework of the Maslow pyramid of needs, where you have some basic needs that everybody has. It's the location thing, but it's also being warm, healthy, like you can live in that home comfortably, parking actually, and so on. But then there's like different levels, and without going into the entire detail of that framework, would say that the more you go up the ladder of needs, the more differentiated they become. And that is, if you understand that, that's a real opportunity, because then you can save in economies of scale on the thing that everybody wants, and differentiate and build customizability and personalization the higher up you go in that ladder of needs. And that means that you're being really strategic where you invest in customization.
Yeah. And so if I'm a buyer and I'm thinking through that, so I guess there's my more obvious needs, and so storage was another one. What about I think privacy came up pretty heavy in the research as well.
Privacy is a huge barrier in people's minds. There's it feels almost like mythical, that people just believe that townhouses are not private. But again, also because of experiences of terrible design, that is also that reputational damage that's already been done. But everything that you can demonstrate, not just tell people about, yes, address it for sure if you only can tell them, but also show people and show homes and walkthroughs and so on, that addresses these intangibles. So the can I see myself living here in terms of like using this space flexibly, like setting up a show home in different ways for different types of audiences could bring that across, for example, or having different pictures that have the room set up in a different way. Then privacy is a big one. Show them what it happens when the window closes and they can't hear the noise outside anymore. Actually make people feel that out in the show home. Another big one, is that dirty space, explain that, brand it that way. If there's no garage, then like talk them through how that functional need is met otherwise, and so on.
Yeah, so that's from the developer perspective, right? And then I guess so I'm thinking from a buyer perspective, and so if I was to sort of play that back, I think buyers will naturally have a whole lot of hidden biases around townhouse living, because we're not used to it, and some of it could be real, particularly if if they've seen some bad developments. Some of it will probably be just perception.
Yeah.
And so you've got to work through those things as a buyer. So some of the things like with privacy is getting some comfort around intertenancy walls, for example. That modern intertenancy walls are soundproof.
Yeah.
You don't get noise transfer between units.
I have a 3-year-old as a neighbor, and I never hear him.
Yeah, no, the reality is that like those issues were dealt with a long time ago. Back in the 70s, it wasn't dealt with. These days, noise cancelling intertenancy walls is just common practice. Double glazing. I was talking to my sister the other day. She's in glazing, and she was saying double glazing is pretty good, but what you really want is a double glazing with the hush glass. She's like, that's incredible, that stuff. So, yeah, understanding the glazing and what's getting put into a development is a way to address that. Thinking about one of the other ones that I've seen, the big one for me. And I'm trying to encourage developers to do this, but as a buyer, one of the big ones for me is recessed ranch sliding doors. And when I say recess, what I mean is there's a bit of an alcove between the ranch slider and the outside. And I think that space creates a noise barrier to the neighbors.
And a sense of privacy, because it
and privacy as well, visual privacy as well. It sort of achieves both, right? But often it's worth thinking through these things. When I'm living in this space, how's this going to feel? What about this design is going to address my concerns around privacy? Maybe not even just looking at the floor plan of your unit, but looking at it in the context of the whole development.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a really good, I would also say, as a buyer, if you walk onto a development and you just see a sea of sameness and it all looks very much the same, that already signals investor, and this was built with investor interest in mind. Yeah. I think that the more you see developments go up that have like 2 bedrooms next to 4 bedrooms with yard space, without yard space, with a courtyard, with parking, different parking options and so on. That's when a developer has clearly understood that people are unique and that they've thought it through to the end user. And I think that is the best predictor for you actually also enjoying living there, because if it's built for investors, then it's built for people who are never actually going to have to put
I can give you an example. So one of the developments we've helped a client in Champion Street is just off Belly Ave, 5 minutes from CBD. They've built with owner-occupied in mind. And even in this really tough townhouse market, they've sold all 4 of them within 8 weeks of getting code of compliance. Great design, but again, at the end of the day, it was just affordable price. Simple, beautiful design, block of only 4 units, and all 4 sold within 8 weeks. The design was just so functional, and all went to first home buyers.
I was going to say, there's an added element to this, because I think one of the things for home buyers when you're buying is what sort of community will I have around me in 5 years' time? And if you go into a development and it feels like investment property, you're just going to have a whole lot of renters, and renters don't care. They don't form bonds because they're only there for a year or two. That it's not a community. Whereas when you get a high level of owner occupied, that's when you get that real sense of community.
That is super true. Not saying that we shouldn't build houses that are good for renters as well. I really feel like there was one quote that kind of broke my heart about Queenstown having like smaller and smaller units, and that people are just crammed into them because they have nowhere else to go. And again, what that does to communities overall needs to be acknowledged. But you're absolutely right that if you build, if you're in a development where you're feeling out that this is going to be a lot of owner occupiers, you're going to have the security that people are actually going to invest in diversifying their front yards
Yeah.
and like having different plants up. And so landscaping, by the way, also smart landscaping, smart choices around, first of all, which types of plants might actually survive in the climate that you put them in. So maybe investing in some natives, but also placing them in a way that supports privacy, for example. That's a big one. And you can like see that really quickly, that if it's just a sort of olive tree that's been placed somewhere because there was a gap, or if it's a strategically placed tree that will make sense in 5 years' time when it's actually in a little bit bigger to block some views, or just create a better atmosphere, basically.
I just wanted to go back to you, Nathan, and sort of say, okay, so for a home buyer buying off plan, you know, what do they need to think about from a finance perspective?
Security of jobs is the number one thing when I talk to people. Like, you need to understand that unit, if you're buying off the plans, it might not complete in 12 months' time. So often we've got a lot of banks that can give you an approval for full 12 months. That's a huge certainty for home buyers that, hey, if I go unconditional, pay my deposit, my approval is valid for full 12 months. And generally, like, you need to buy something that you can settle within 12 months. If you're buying something that settles in 2 years' time, it's a big question mark for me. And I'll probably request my buyers and say, just be careful if you're buying something today that settles in 2027. Why such a huge delay? And buyers that just need 5% deposit if you're buying as a first home, which is so affordable. You can buy with 10% deposit. All the banks, they are happy to lend first home buyers on 5%, 10%, but 5% with that Kayongara. Some banks, they can also do 10% for investments, but you need to have a strong reason why you need to buy with 10%, because often, you'll be paying quite a lot interest upfront. Buyers, from a finance point of view, it's probably the easiest approval you can get from the bank if the property is brand new, because they don't come in under the speed limits. So it's exempted. All the new builds off the plans, they're exempted from the speed limits. So you can go to any bank and get an approval with 10% deposit.
Yeah, and so some banks will do a full 12-month approval. Some won't, so you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful about that. You have to renew, and often as advisors, it's our responsibility to make sure, hey, can we actually get an approval from a bank? That approval is valid for 12 months. So, and it's important to know, look, you're not expecting really a change in your personal and financial position. We had a lot of clients in the peak of the market. They've bought a lot of stuff, and they know the settlement is coming in 3 months' time, but I'm actually going to Aussie. So what do I do? We had lots of clients, they're going to Aussie. So we, as advisors, we have to disclose this to the bank and say, hey, scenario has changed. Now this property will be a rental. Here is a rental appraisal. It's just... The banks are generally good though, right? That's one of the things that we found, certainly over COVID. We had a lot of clients losing their jobs at the same time as needing to settle these properties, and the banks were settling them. So we had situations where people had lost their jobs. I'm thinking of Air New Zealand in particular. And the bank was like, okay, look, we'll settle it. If you haven't found work in the next 6 months, then you'll need to sell it, which is fair enough. None of them ended up having to sell. Everyone got work. It was fine. But banks, to give them credit, banks will work hard to find a solution that works for the customer.
Absolutely. And we've seen they've been really good in all of those tricky scenarios. They always try to help people as much as they can, really.
Well, one of the things I would say is get your valuations done up front. Don't leave it to the end. We have seen recently a lot of people, they're approaching us and they would have done approvals from the bank before, and now valuations are coming 20, 30 grand lower than the purchase price. And banks, they'll always go with the lower of the value. So then it's an awkward conversation to go back to developer and say, hey, I bought it for 700, here is a valuation of 660. Will you drop the price to 660? So good luck trying to have this discussion with developer. It's not really exciting, isn't it? So you're telling them to drop 40 grand, but
Yeah, it is what it is. So, cool.
That's
Awesome.
it for us. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you have any questions or things you'd like us to talk about in the future, get in touch with us at david@squirrel.co.nz or john@squirrel.co.nz. And please do share this and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. The opinions expressed in this podcast are not financial advice or a recommendation of any financial product. Any commentary provided are personal views and are not necessarily representative of the opinions of Squirrel. As always, we recommend seeking professional investment or mortgage advice before taking any action.